Very good evening to our viewers. Thank you for joining us tonight on the agenda. My name is Toibon Jabela, your host. Tonight on the platform, we are hosting Executive Director in the Ministry of Information and Communication Technology, Dr. Audrin Mathe. And we are here simply to reflect on the year that was, and that is 2024, of course, coming to a close. It has been a very long year, bittersweet in many respects, and Dr. Mathe is here to help me unpack how it went. Thank you very much, Doc, for making time.
Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. So I think the first thing really was the death of the president.
Yes.
I know that that weekend you were just celebrating your birthday somewhere, and the news struck that the president has passed on, and you have worked with him very closely already from the 1990s when he was prime minister. If you can reflect on the kind of relationship that you had with him and how you received the news.
Thank you so very much for the opportunity, Toivo. As you know, I worked with him when I was 25 years in the early 2000s. But I've met him 89. August 89 during the campaign. At that stage already he showed his interest in working with young people.
Yeah.
When there was a star rally somewhere that he was addressing, there was no young person on the stage.
Yeah.
So he asked that they bring two people from Nansov.
Okay.
I just happened to be nearer the person that was being sent.
Yeah.
I wasn't the most senior person at all, but I just happened to be closer to when the call was made. So I went to sit up with him plus other person. He's deceased now. So that's when we met.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, after independence, 93, I started working for NBC. Then 95, that's when I got to interact with him more now in my role as a television producer. So we forged a relationship then that really was there until the last day. As you said correctly, when I was celebrating my birthday, we were out of town. And then someone just telephoned me in the middle of the morning to say this is what has happened. So obviously, I had to retreat to the hotel where I was staying. So that we then process the news, then inform those that needed to be informed at that point in time. Then, as you know, an hour later, now President Mbumba had to appear on television to inform the nation. It's for me, it proves two things. One is that the constitutional order upon which our state is founded, the moment that we knew that is what has happened, the state machinery began to work so that we fulfill those constitutional obligations. Later that afternoon, obviously, President Mbumba was sworn in as president to replace the deceased president. That is really what President Gengub has worked over for his life. When he was chairing the Constituent Assembly, these were some of the issues that they had to grapple with. How do you transition from one party or one administration to the next without having to disrupt the system? We've seen what has happened in other countries, not just in Africa, but really even in Europe, where the order was disturbed because there was no clarity in terms of what the role of the military is and the role of the civilian leadership. But in our case, that has been clarified. There was complete order to where our preoccupation was more to mourn the president than really who was in charge and how that took place, because it was so seamless. The rest of the world did not notice, and that's how smooth it was.
Absolutely. Well, what do you recall of Gengub, especially those years that you've worked with him in his office as Prime Minister at the time? The kind of leader that he was. What did he bring to the table?
You know, I had a background in a television broadcast. You know, I wasn't imbued in communication, political communications, more precisely. So when I came to work for him, I really have to throw away what I thought I knew and begin afresh to understand the person that he was and really the depth of knowledge that he had was able to make me run on the job. And we established a very good communication machinery in the Office of the Prime Minister. We were there to communicate almost daily about what the Prime Minister was doing, but also largely what the Office of the Prime Minister was doing. Also, in terms of one of the things that we learned quickly is really not to repeat something that you're not sure if it's true. If you were to tell him something, you have to be absolutely sure that you're telling him the truth. The danger for that, if you tell him something that wasn't correct, he may very well repeat it to the president, who then may repeat it to the rest of the country or make a decision based on something that is completely unsubstantiated. That's what I got to learn from the word go. Don't throw around gossip, because if you tell him something, you assume you've done your work and you're telling him something is true. He's very likely to repeat it to someone else if that becomes necessary. So that's one of the things. So he was very upright about us having to tell the truth all the time. Also, if you're at fault, what that said to do was that you have to admit that, okay, it's wrong, so that he knows how to assist you if you need assistance and so forth, than to cover up something that is not there. Also, in terms of writing out his speeches, he was very particular. He would say, the speech you're writing is not for you, it's me that is going to deliver it. Therefore, it must sound like me. So I used to be a script writer at NBC. So all of that knowledge wasn't so useful after all, because now I have to write for a prime minister who then must serve the country. And I think that was very fulfilling at the end of the period that I worked with him until the time that obviously he was moved out of the office of the prime minister. So obviously when he came back again, we've been in touch. As he used to say publicly, so these are my kids. Some people would laugh at that, but the reality is that most of the time, even when we were working, you work from home, from his home. In the weekends, when there was time, we spend most of the time around his residence. And that's why he always said that I brought up these kids. It was not really just to send in a message, but to say that these kids, they grew up under my tutelage.
And I was coming exactly to that point also, because I know that you have maintained also a personal relationship afterwards. How was he outside the officialdom space?
You know, this is perhaps part of the side of let Gengo people did not see, because if you were in an informal settlement, informal place, they could actually see him better. I mean, I saw him with his family, with his wife, with the kids. You know, a very relaxed person who just want to be around with people that he cared about. If you met him with his wife at home, you would think there's people they just met yesterday and they're busy quoting each other. That's really how close in the way. And that was fulfilling, because you see the person for who he is outside the political space. And he loved sport. And one of the things that we had the differences on is that you know, I support Chelsea, and he was on the side of Liverpool. So if there is a game, if Liverpool is playing, and then he says, "Why don't you come around and watch football?" So this other day, he actually made a mistake. He said, "Look, come and watch football. Liverpool is playing," but he wasn't aware that I was on the side of Chelsea. So I showed up in a Chelsea jersey. First, his wife came and said, "Oh, Audrin, you came like that?" I said, "Yeah, I mean, we have to make the team more competitive than just to support one team, then it's not enjoyable." Then the president walked in and said, "Mathe, how, for a government communication expert, how do you walk in here in a Chelsea t-shirt in my house and we're playing Liverpool?" So we all laughed. And I think really just the person that, he brought this up a number of times. But he wasn't intimidating me, but really that's the person who he was. You know, he creates jokes, you know, he makes everyone else comfortable in his presence. Sometimes you go, I was working on a project with him. I'll go there in the morning, I come back at midnight or way past midnight. I'll have breakfast there, I'll have lunch there, and I'll have dinner. Then I still stay and just to relax and enjoy. Because the problem is that if you want to come and visit him, don't come and visit for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Because you have to budget for longer than that.
Yeah.
Because, he really was a people's person that he will stay awake until he is tired, and he said, okay, now you can go and sleep.
Yeah.
So that's really the person that he was of the office.
Absolutely. Maybe this question should have come a bit earlier before we went into his the casual side of his, but maybe the last question really on Geingob. What role do you think he played, particularly in the post-independence era of our country, especially during that key transition of our country? We have no state institutions, we have nothing, we have to start from scratch. And somehow, those became one of the best years of our livelihood as a country.
Absolutely. People don't appreciate what the government looks like in 1990 because we've never seen it. Most of us grew up, the systems are already in place. The biggest challenge that we had to overcome as a country was to unite the people. That is why SWAPO then had adopted, even before independence, the policy of national reconciliation, that we were going to live in harmony with each other. When he became Prime Minister, that really became one of the things that he had to, one of the centerpiece messages that he had to propagate to everyone else.
Yeah.
He was talking about a building in a Namibian house. This metaphor did not start now when he was president. It started way back in the 90s. In his office, there were a lot of us that mirrored the rest of the country. You could find anyone of shade, anyone of a different language in there, because he wanted the country, his office, to look like the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. You find white people. One of his lead bodyguard at that stage was a white African male who was working for Louis Pienaar. But he was a Namibian. He knew that he was performing the duties that were assigned to him. So Geingob had brought him to come and work in his office. He was interviewed together with the current Chief Inspector General, the Inspector General of Police. They were interviewed for that position. Mm-hmm. And in fact, when Reinhardt left, Inspector General Shikongo actually took over from Reinhardt. Mm-hmm. This is a mosaic. All of us who were there, we came from different backgrounds altogether. And he relished the idea that young people should be prepared, that should the opportunity arises, they are ready for it. Mm. There were many young people that went through the offices. Dr. Simata, who is now Secretary of Cabinet, Matthew Govaseb, who was a speechwriter at that time, Saki Shangala, you have Kadanamo. There were many who went through. Petros Damasep, who was the first permanent secretary in the office of the Prime Minister at 28 years old. Mm. So you could see the faith that he had in young people. That continued until his death. The cabinet that he had a lot of people there that were appointed into his cabinet because he understood the future lies in the acceptance of young people into leadership structures.
Mm. Absolutely. Thank you, Doc. So let's talk then about around the same time also your ministry was busy with of course, with other state actors, with the registration of SIM cards. People are always suspicious. Now the state want to spy on us, and they were reluctant, and then there was a deadline, and then there was an extension until to a point where everybody said, no, we are now cutting off your numbers. Mm. If you can tell us what was important about that exercise.
First and foremost, it was to prevent cybercrime. To give you an example, if you can just dial back, sometime back, someone went in front of the telecom head office in Windhoek, the Independence Avenue. There used to be telephone booths. I don't know if they're still there. Mm. Someone went to make a phone call there and say, we're going to bomb the American embassy now. Then made another call into Sanlam building to say there's a bomb in that building. It was a hoax at the end of the day. Can you imagine if that was true? Then can you imagine if that would have led to casualties because people will have evacuated in Hestinburg and people die. You find people using SIM cards to commit crime. then they destroy it, they buy another one because we wouldn't know who it is. We really wanted to stop that. But also we have an obligation to international bodies which we are signatories to ensure that SIM cards are identified by their owners. And that's the standard all over the world. We're the only one other country that did not do that. So we have complied with that. It has nothing to do with the fact that we are spying on people. If there was a need to do that, there are always laws in place. The Criminal Procedures Act already provide that whoever, the police, whoever, they can approach a judge, then they can issue a warrant in which they can intercept a phone call. It's done legally. So why you want to do it any other way if there's already provision made in the law? So it has nothing to do with that. And there was a lot of misconception about people who felt entitlement in the country. Like you find journalists who say that journalists should not be covered by that. Who says that journalists cannot commit crime? Journalists, they are people like any other citizen. It's just that they do a different job altogether. Then the next time we hear that medical doctors also want to be exempted because they have information about their clients on the phone. You see, so where do you draw a line? It's really a fact that all of us must comply to the rules when they are passed.
Absolutely. What do you think has been, are you satisfied now with the status going forward? You feel that we are on a trajectory now as a country? Absolutely.
If you look at the number of registration of SIM cards, I think it went about 98%. So only a few of those, but I'm sure in the end, they probably went back and got SIM cards in a proper manner. So we succeeded in that regard. But what was disheartening is really the Namibian attitude where you ask people to do something, they wait until the last minute. Registration of voters, same thing. You give them 3 months, please go and register to become a voter. They go on the last 3 hours of registration. I do not know how to change that. That is something that we have to work on as a country. When we are called upon to act, I think we should act in a manner that's prescribed.
Absolutely. And then one of the success stories, again, of course, SIM registration is a success, whatever way you look at it. I was one of the people who were among the first to have mine registered because I just felt it's a good thing, especially in the context of what has been happening, having headlines about even senior government officials being scammed, Prime Minister, Minister of Defense. I mean, if you can scam a defense minister, how about Joe Sixpack from elsewhere, so I can understand that. But the other success story was the harmonization of data between Namibia and Botswana. What can you tell us about that?
Indeed, that was one of the things that we hope that will continue, irrespective of the fact that we have a new government in Botswana now. What it's safe to do, to give you a very practical example, if you are a truck driver operating between Mozambique, between Maputo and Walfish Bay, you'll be passing through 4 countries, perhaps. That means that you have to have a SIM card or a phone in every country, so that when you drive from Botswana, from Maputo, you get into South Africa, you have a South African number now. When you cross from South Africa into Botswana, you have a South African Botswana number. If you cross from Botswana into Namibia, then you have a Namibian number. That has not been a very smart thing to do. So what we are saying was that you should have one number that you drive from Walfish Bay to Maputo without having to swap anything else. That can only happen if, one, you lower the cost of roaming, which we have done. It has gone down by up to 94%. Where we used to pay $26 a minute, now we pay $1 per minute. So you can speak longer now without having to feel the pain that we felt before. You have people that live on the border between Botswana and Namibia. I live on the border as well. Evidently, you're sitting under a tree in a village, but you're unaware that you're actually roaming. In the next 10 minutes, you get messages that you've depleted your data. So precisely for that there have to be mobility between two people, there have to be movement of goods and services, and telecommunications can play a very significant role to make that easier.
Yeah, I mean, and that came just hot on the heels of the the scrapping of also passports between Namibians and Botswana residents crossing into each other, into each country.
Absolutely.
Also a very good thing now in terms of movement.
Yes, again, because I live on the border, my dad, we have relatives on the other side, we have relatives on Impalila. So if there's a death, there are 5 deaths in a month, you're going to be stamping your passport at least 10 times. 5 times, 5 and 10 on the other side.
Yeah.
So your passport doesn't last.
Yeah.
But now you simply produce your ID.
Yeah.
Then they know who you are, they allow you access without having to stamp anything. So that's really a good thing. We have a lot of Botswana who come to Namibia for holidays. So those numbers, they are projected to increase this year, because this will be the first year that agreement is in place. We'll see how that is going to affect all of these, the volumes in terms of to drive tourism into Namibia. What is hoped is that this really, the initiative between the two countries become something of SADC, that all of us can move into South Africa or into Angola or Zambia and Zimbabwe without requiring a passport to do so.
Yeah.
I think it will increase volumes. Obviously, there are some concerns that should still be ironed with other countries, but it will be a good thing to do even for data, even for roaming charges. Obviously, there's already a SADC, at least with respect to roaming. There's a SADC decision on this. It's just that more members must ratify it to have effect. Obviously, there's some resistance in some quarters, but we hope that at the end of the day, we will see wisdom in us having to communicate better as Africans.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Doc, because in fact I was coming to that question about whether beyond the two countries there's appetite from elsewhere in the region to join this kind of harmonization. I know that it's one of your very passionate things, having worked with you before, and I know that there are many initiatives that you were driving, that you wanted to become sort of, to have a regional buy-in. So I suppose one step at a time. It's a good thing.
Yes.
But we go for a very short break and then return with Dr. Audrin Mathe.
Santa has a festive surprise for you. Starting 2nd December, unwrap the magic of Christmas with our Advent calendar. Spot the Christmas globes in your favorite newspapers from Monday to Friday. Scan the QR code or WhatsApp hashtag Advent Calendar 24 to the Synergy chatbot. Find the Christmas globes on NTV. Or visit our Facebook pages for daily Advent doors from Monday to Saturday. Win daily prizes. Lucky winners will be contacted and Logistics Hub Namibia will deliver your prize. Merry Christmas from Santa and his proud prize sponsors.
The conversation continues on the agenda with Dr. Audrin Mathe. Now, Doc, let's talk about the events that transpired in the media space this year, especially at institutions that fall directly under your ministry. You have pronounced yourself as a ministry on the situation of Jonathan Biekes at New Era, who, after leaving the institution, wrote a stinging letter accusing the Ministry of interference, almost actually saying that his exit was at the instigation of the ministry. What can you tell us about that episode?
We have responded to that. We have said that that is a matter that is best addressed by the board of directors. Our role as government is to appoint the board of directors. Once that has been appointed, they took responsibility for the public enterprises that they preside over.
Yeah.
Most of the time, we see things same time as everyone else in the media.
Yeah.
We sometimes agree with what is written in the media or about the media. Sometimes we don't agree. But then when you don't agree, you should also allow us to say government interfering. It's simply that we have a different attitude to what is being spoken about. And they tend to see that it's interference. But also, if you look at it, I mean, the late Lindsay Scott used to say, people in the media think they are more entitled than anyone else. Their opinions, they matter more than any other person's opinion. The fact that you control the pen means that you have more time to write than us. But really, it doesn't mean that your views are much more important than anyone else. Everyone else, whether you're in government or out of government, we have views about these things. When those people respond, it cannot be seen to say it's an attack on press freedom or for anything like that. It's just that, like you, they're entitled to express their opinions. You may not like it. You may like it. That's exactly what the media points us to say. We have the right to express our opinions. So we have to create a balance between having acceptable criticism where we don't want to be muzzled just because you work in government. You can't express your views. Yeah. Also, you can't be muzzled because you work for a media organization. But what a media person says publicly about other things, about opinions, has an effect into the credibility, whether does your personal view influence the stories that you write. And I think that's important. And we've seen in the media that the media operators, number of them, they've become more like civil society activists. So you're not sure now, when do they express their opinion and when do they write objective articles that I can understand to mean that we are fairly covered, my views have been correctly reflected without the bias of the writer. So I think we have to grapple with this. Then I see this bit of chatter that our press rankings have fallen. What was the reason why it fallen? And they didn't come out now, by the way. They've been in the space for a long time. But the stories, they are thrown around as if this is something recently. On September 13th, I spoke about, I was saying, what is the methodology employed to arrive at, especially the report of this year? Because what they are citing there is to say that media was kicked out at State House during COVID. But COVID was 2022, 2021. So why is that report cited now 2024, almost 2 years after the fact? Why is that reason not cited in the report of last year? It means they couldn't find anything about Namibia. Therefore, they take things from that happened 2022, 2021. Because I think it was 2021 when that story occurred. So 3 years has elapsed, and they're citing it now. Unfortunately, we have very questioning a media who really grab everything and make it headlines. But they don't go beyond the headlines to say, why is it like this? So we can inform our people better when you arrive at a conclusion, when you can explain the conclusion arrived at by whoever does the study. And no one has written about that. They just say that the Namibia has fallen downwards. But they don't say why. And I'm explaining to you now, and no one has bothered. I said I issued a statement on the 13th of September. I didn't see anyone writing about it, but at least the Namibian newspaper, they published my entire speech where I reflected on this. I just hope that we should become an unquestioning media, but ready to delve this. And this is one thing about, to what extent does patriotism becomes into play in our lives, whether it's media or whoever. The Western media, you have, if you take the American media, they are heavily divided between Republicans and Democrats. They attack each other. But at the end of the day, they can identify who their enemies are. They will tell you China is our enemy. They will tell you Russia is our enemy. Besides the difficulties, the situation that they may find themselves in their country. But what we have is a different agenda altogether. It's as if the intention is to make the entire country look bad. Who suffers? It's us. If you're going to portray a negative image there that is not basic, that's not substantial, it's the country that suffers, including the journalists. Then we're going to say we need a salary adjustment. The money is going to come from where if your businesses are not making profit?
So very elaborate. So as a trained journalist yourself, Doc, what can you tell us about this period that we find ourselves now, the advent of technology, social media, because your observation is spot on as far as the expression of personal opinions by people like myself who are in this trade, and what we produce the next day for your consumption, that the line becomes blurry. But where do you draw the line? Because you know, in my case, for example, I'm a very senior person in this industry, and sometimes my views matter on certain things, and people just want to hear what is a guy like Toiwan Jabela have to say on a particular issue. How do we grapple around that?
It's interesting. I mean, when I used to operate on your side of business, there were many senior journalists before me that I was looking at. You almost don't know what they think. You can only read between the lines on the stories, in the stories that they write,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't hear them expressing an opinion about this subject, which has become the trend now. I see that as more, one, maybe there's lots of frustrations. Maybe you don't give your journalists a space to write opinion pieces in the paper without them having to express it on their private media account, social media account. Also, I see there's a lot of, there's a lack of experience now in the newsrooms. The newsrooms have become very junior because those that are senior, they tend to move out again to do other things. As a result, you have people that have just finished university, and then they mirror, they pass on what they hear on the street and make it an opinion for themselves to the rest of the country. That is extremely dangerous because what media operators ought to do is give me information. I'll make up a decision based on the information that you've given me.
Yeah.
But don't push me in a corner that I must think like you or must behave in a manner that you expect me to. Your job is, it's like lawyers, judges. Even when they are attacked, you don't hear judges expressing an opinion about anything else because they know that people may misunderstand their judgments on their public comments. That's the reason why they're so reserved. You wouldn't hear a judge making comments about this, about that, because they realize that the job that they hold is so important that any perception of bias will lead to a miscarriage of justice, because people are going to complain to say, oh, this judge didn't rule in my favor because previously he said that the DTA government is very bad or the FOBO government is so bad. So you have to keep those opinions to yourself, so that when you say it's a matter, as I said, you have pages where you can express your opinions on. So why don't we use those editorial pages?
Yeah.
So that then the editor then can look at it and say, this opinion based on fact, and then publish those opinions similarly.
Yeah, yeah. You spoke about patriotism, and I think it's a very important point. Of course, the interpretation sometimes is that if I'm exposing wrong things that are happening in my country, that I'm somehow not patriotic, while I actually feel that I'm doing a patriotic duty to expose what is bad in terms of governance and whatnot. But there's a recent incident that transpired at MBC. Is one of the institutions operating under our ministry, where Anna Nicodemus, one of their editors, got suspended. Of course, MBC seems to be handling the matter on their own, and that is good. And there's no accusation of fingers being pointed at the ministry, which is a good thing. But the subject of patriotism came into this conversation. People saying, you know, when you're speaking about your country, especially to a foreign media, that somehow there ought to be some boundaries. I mean, I was interviewed a lot around the same time by Power FM, which is a South African radio station. And one of the questions that they put to me was, okay, we hear now that the opposition is rejecting the election result, and that they are going to court, and this Namibia is in this uncharted, the word they used, Namibia is in this uncharted waters. What do you anticipate? You know, are the streets safe and stuff like that? And I corrected them immediately to say, it's actually not uncharted waters. We've been here before, and we have a history of handling our political differences very maturely and through the established channels. And I told them So yeah, basically that there will be no conflict, because I must be naive, but it is just, there are no indications, and history tells us that nothing of the sort happens usually. But in this particular case, the lady is saying, I mean, it's the video is out there. She says, she talks about the age of the president-elect. She talks about her having fallen twice. We were told all along that it only happened once, but even that was not verified. And she spoke the way she did. The colleagues at Namibia Media Trust did a good job by sort of going under the whole thing and establishing that the assertions were simply not correct. Does it speak to exactly what you just mentioned about the responsibility that journalists ought to have?
Yeah, without getting into the NBC matter really, but just to give you a general answer to it, is that obviously you ought to be patriotic of a country. Patriotism doesn't mean that you must praise even things that are wrong. It doesn't mean that. It actually means the opposite. Yeah. For you to point out the wrongs with evidence to say, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Minister, I hear that your executive director has taken 17 computers, then now that it is village. Here the picture that we took of him getting the computers. That's patriotism. Yeah. But not to throw an accusation to say, President, your ministers are very corrupt. All of them, they're driving government cars after hours. What is it? Because they're entitled to drive those cars. So what is corrupt about that? Yeah. So it's really the fact that one is we try to impugn the character of others without evidence, or the character of our, even the reputation of our own country without evidence. We say Namibia is very corrupt. Just say that Teven Jembera is corrupt. Don't say Namibia, because Namibia is an institution. It's a state. It doesn't ask for anything. It's us that occupies the state that will have different actions within the state. So why don't you say that the Minister of Justice has done this, as opposed to say ministers do this? And when we say that please give us a fair hearing, it's not to say you must praise even the bad thing that the government is doing. No, we're not saying that praise us. Say, please, if you criticize us fairly with substance in our accusation. So you also know how to self-correct. If there's we've given a tender to build a clinic, and the tender was awarded 10 years ago, and the clinic is still not there, why don't you, as a patriotic journalist, come and say, Minister, you negotiated, you broke the ground for this clinic. It's 10 years now. Where is the clinic? I think that's the role that the media could play. It's more developmental. But understand the pressure in which you find yourself. You realize a story like that of building a clinic doesn't sell your paper. So what do? You start looking for things that are more negative. At the end of the day, that's why you see people now that are being paid through the courts, because they've deformed their character without any substance to it. I think we should guard against that. Everyone else, president, ministers, EDs, directors, journalists, we have the same rights that are protected by the Constitution. So don't feel that just because I work for government, therefore money is a target. Criticize me if it's I fail to do my job. By all means, say that the ED of ICT is very incompetent. This is a strategic plan that he said he was going to implement. Nothing has been done. Fair competition altogether.
Absolutely. Well, what are the guarantees from your ministry, Doc, going into the new year? We are going to have a new president inaugurated, especially against the background of this perceived deterioration, if you like. Maybe it's too strong a word, but that our ranking will be affected and all that. I know that your minister has consistently spoken publicly that you will continue to protect the rights of the media. Of course, it's true what you said, that we are not without fault. We are also really not, I'll be the first to put up my hand as a senior person in this industry, that there's been incidences that are really, really bad to the reputation of our industry. But what sort of guarantee can you give us going forward as far as press freedom is concerned, especially when a new president is coming in and we do not know how this president will act? Hage Geingob was very, when I was a darling of the media, we loved him. We had a hate-love relationship. but overall we loved him because of that. The good thing, perhaps the silver lining for now, is that Netumana Ndaitwah was information minister at one stage, and maybe that will help us also.
You see, this is a multi-pronged approach. One is that what does the media do with all of this? You will recall the last Africa Barometer report. The media is ranked very, 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 very low. People's perception about the media is very low. But this is out there. The media doesn't write anything about it because you don't think it's good for your image. You see the point there.
Yeah.
But there is a report like that says media is perceived very lowly in the country itself. So we have to start from there. What is the reason why people think the media is a very low institution? There is no credibility. We have to do it with what we write and how we write it. I think if we start there, because you will get a call at 5 minutes to 5 to say, I need your comment, and I'm going to bed at 6 o'clock. See, I have other things to do every day other than responding to media, but your job is actually to write every day. So we have other things to do other than just waiting for people to call me to give a comment because in 40 minutes he's going to bed. So we have to have that symbiotic relationship. We've changed it from government. And this is coming to your question directly to say, what are we doing? We have been very responsive. The cabinet adopted a government communication strategy where ministers, they go every day to the GSC where they make statements, they take questions. From the beginning, there was a lot of journalists coming to the studio, but now they stopped. They watch on television. So they don't have an opportunity of asking those questions now. What does it say about you? We've been crying that we don't have access to the ministers. We've now taken the ministers, put them in the studio, ask the questions that you were always meaning to ask. So this is really what we hope that you reciprocate, the openness that have been developed over the years. The PROs, they get trained. You are one of those that we have asked to come in and chat to our media so that we understand what it requires for you to get a good story out there without much time to waste. We've involved public media in all of this because our idea is to make sure that government is accessible at every level. We have now, we bought equipment for every region that from next year, governors will start making statements also adopting the formula of the GIC here, and then they will answer questions there so that we hear directly what is being done in the regions. We have to play an active role in this. Yeah. Just because now that is there, we expect that you will be there and ask the tough questions that you want to ask. Not wait until I'm there, then you said, but what did the minister say there when the minister was actually in the studio? So we expect that there's going to be responsibility from your end to really play the role that indeed the space is open for the media to operate, as it has always been.
Yeah. As we draw to a close, Doc, from the ministry side, in terms of your strategic plans and whatnot, what can we expect in 2025? I know, for example, that some of the institutions under your ministry, like MTC, they are still rolling out their network for, I suppose the target is 100% national coverage and whatnot. But what's coming from the ministry in the coming months?
Indeed. We regulate MTC. They have a functional reporting to the Minister of Public Enterprises, Finance and Public Enterprises. What we've done is that over the next 4 years, if I may add, we set aside $155 million to roll out infrastructure. Yeah. You can't talk about digital government or connectivity if you don't have that spread. So every year we're going to build at least 10 sites. And the reason why we do that is to make sure that every health facility, right now there's connectivity in 74% of health facilities, there's 76% in education facilities. The idea is to connect these 100% by 2030. And I'm quite sure that we will reach the target before 2030. We have identified areas that are underserved, like Kunene. Only 41% of the people there are connected, compared to Commerce, that is about 98% connected. So we are targeting those areas to ensure that people there they get included in the digital world. That will mean you can also talk about financial inclusion. What happens is that if you live in Divundu, then you must go to Rundu to go and access the bank. You must pay $200 to go to Rundu and $200 to come back. $400 if you're a pensioner. That is 400 out of 1,500. So we were saying we want to first wire the country so that we create platforms where people did not need to move simply to do a transaction that could easily been done in their homes. So we are rolling out that. We've already rolled it out now, up to for the next 4 years. Then we'll evaluate and see how that is going to happen. People have not noticed that there's been a reduction in the cost of data in the country. We used to be one of the most expensive on the continent. Now we range closer to where we need to be. So the idea is now that the fights over universal service fund has been concluded, is really to take that money and reinvest it so that one, we're able to subsidize the construction of transmitters, subsidize schools in terms of access to data, so that at some point population coverage is 100%. Then if you look at how do you then cover the geographic coverage, because what we are focusing now is population coverage, but geographic coverage will mean that I will drive from here to Kitmans Hope without a break in transmission of the network. So that's really what we are trying to do. Obviously, there's some conversations about having access to satellite. The Angolan government have guaranteed the access and an allotment for every study country on their satellite constellation. Once the tests have been concluded, we'll see how that takes us. Because ideally, satellite would be it's expensive as an investment, but it's the best option in terms of having to cover such a huge country as ours.
Absolutely. Doc, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. That is Dr. Audrin Mathe. He is the Executive Director in the Ministry of Information and Communication Technology, walking us through the year that was 2024. I hope you have tapped into his wisdom like I did, and thank you for watching.